My husband's secret addiction unleashed a nightmare I never saw coming. Hey Reddit, I never imagined I'd be writing here, but after everything that's happened, I need somewhere to sort out my thoughts, and maybe, just maybe, find a little clarity. A few years ago, I was living a life people dream about. My name's Sylvia, 34 years old, female. I'm a clinical psychologist, and my husband, Ron, 36 years old, male, is a local hero. Ron played pro hockey, and he was the kind of man who made every room brighter. Charismatic, driven, loyal to his friends, and totally devoted to me. We'd been together since college, built our lives from nothing, and just last spring, I finally opened my private practice, a little office filled with light, books, and hope. Our home was a reflection of our happiness, laughter over coffee, spontaneous getaways, wild cheering at Ron's games, and deep, late-night conversations. To the world and ourselves, we were unstoppable, a team. But even the strongest teams have breaking points. Looking back, maybe the warning signs were always there. Ron's career was everything to him, his identity, his passion, his escape. When he got injured during a high-stakes playoff game, everything changed overnight. He tore a ligament in his knee, and the doctors said it would take at least a year to fully recover, maybe longer. Suddenly, the roar of the stadium was replaced by endless rehab, pain, and uncertainty. At first, I tried to be the rock he needed. I picked up extra clients, made his favorite meals, and told him it was okay to feel scared. But as the weeks dragged on, Ron withdrew into himself. He started snapping at me over little things, leaving a mess in the kitchen, forgetting to take out the trash. The man who once brought me flowers just because now barely looked me in the eye. That was when the pills started. Prescription opioids, just to take the edge off, he said. But I could see the emptiness in his eyes. Then came the drinking, the late nights alone on the couch, the bitterness in his voice. I tried to reach him, but it felt like he was already slipping away. The distance between us kept growing. Ron's injury healed more slowly than expected, and the team quietly replaced him with a younger player. He lashed out at his coaches, at his friends, at me. Sometimes, he'd disappear for hours, claiming he just needed space. I started finding empty bottles hidden in the laundry basket, pill bottles in his gym bag. The worst part was how carefully he lied. He insisted he was fine, that I was overreacting, that everyone in his situation would need a little help. But the man I loved was slipping through my fingers, replaced by someone angry, bitter, and unpredictable. One night, after another argument about his drinking, I found a pad of my prescription forms missing from my desk. At first, I wanted to believe I'd misplaced them. Maybe a patient had borrowed one by accident, but deep down I knew. I was losing Ron, and I was starting to lose myself too. I tried to confront Ron about the missing prescription forms, but he just shrugged and told me not to worry so much. "You're always acting like the world's ending," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. I wanted to believe him. I did, but my intuition screamed otherwise. A week later, the worst happened. Ron was found behind the wheel after a horrific crash on the edge of town. He was drunk, high, and speeding. His car had plowed into a crosswalk, striking a mother and her young daughter. They didn't survive. Neither did Ron. The police showed up at my office that afternoon. They told me about the accident, the toxicology results, and, with stony faces, asked why my prescription forms were in Ron's car. My world stopped. Shock, guilt, and terror crashed over me. I tried to explain. He must have taken them. I hadn't known. I never thought it would come to this. But all I could see were the faces of that woman and her child. Just like that, my career, my marriage, and my peace of mind were shattered. In the days that followed, everything was a blur of police interviews, lawyers, and endless questions. The media spun their stories, psychologists' negligence leads to tragedy, while online strangers called me a monster. Friends vanished. Clients canceled appointments. My practice emptied almost overnight. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ron's face, haunted, lost, unreachable. I replayed every argument, every ignored red flag. Every moment I doubted myself but stayed silent. The guilt was overwhelming, but so was the anger. At Ron, at myself, in a world that could turn so quickly. The authorities questioned how my prescription forms ended up with Ron. I told the truth. I hadn't locked them away. I trusted him. That trust had cost lives. Each day, it felt like I was standing trial not just for what happened, but for every bad decision I'd ever made. The walls of my life closed in, and I wondered if I'd ever feel safe or forgiven again. After weeks of isolation, I decided to keep my practice open, if only to cling to some sense of normalcy. Most of my regular clients were gone, but one afternoon, a new name appeared on my schedule, a man named Mark. He was quiet at first, polite but guarded. During our first session, he told me he was dealing with overwhelming grief after losing his wife and daughter in a tragic accident. My heart stopped as the details unfolded. It was them, the family Ron had killed. I was shaken, but kept it professional. Mark didn't recognize me, or at least pretended not to. He spoke of his anger, his sleepless nights, and the gaping hole left in his life. I wanted desperately to help, but every word felt like a dagger. After that session, I felt more alone than ever. My guilt was raw, and yet I couldn't turn Mark away. Maybe helping him would somehow redeem me, or at least let me survive my pain. But as Mark's visits continued, a strange connection formed, a mix of compassion, guilt, and something darker I couldn't name. As the weeks passed, Mark kept returning. Our sessions grew longer, and the line between therapist and something else began to blur. I felt his pain deeply, sometimes too deeply. We shared silences heavy with things left unsaid. He started bringing me small gifts. A coffee, a book he thought I'd like. I told myself it was gratitude, but part of me felt uneasy. At the same time, strange things began happening. Packages started arriving at my office, cheap Hello Kitty toys, a pink child's backpack, even a book about stalking. None of them were ordered by me. At first, I thought it was some twisted Amazon glitch, but the pattern was unmistakable. The toys were identical to the ones Mark's daughter was holding in the photos he'd shown me. The book was inscribed, "You can never be too careful." I started feeling watched, even in my own home. Shadows moved outside my window, and my phone rang with no one on the line. I changed my locks and told myself I was just being paranoid. But deep down, fear was gnawing at me. Someone wanted me to suffer, and I was starting to think I knew who. Just as I was beginning to unravel, a new patient appeared, Lila, a vibrant woman in her mid-20s. From our first session, her energy was overwhelming, impulsive, flirtatious, and oversharing. She spoke openly about her struggles with intimacy and nymphomania, but the conversation always circled back to one man. She confessed she was obsessed with someone she couldn't have, a married man, someone she described as grieving, mysterious, and broken in the most beautiful way. As she talked, something clicked in my mind. Lila's stories were strangely detailed, as if she knew more about Mark than she let on. At first, I dismissed it as fantasy. But then, one day after her session, I spotted her in the lobby. Her eyes met Mark's as he was leaving. They exchanged a look that told me everything. These two knew each other. That moment sent a chill down my spine. I realized I wasn't just dealing with patients anymore. I was caught in a web, and the threads were drawing tight around me. After that day in the lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something huge. I started paying closer attention to Lila's stories. She described accidentally running into Mark at coffee shops or sending anonymous gifts to people she admired. There was a desperate edge to her confessions, a need to be seen, even if it meant crossing lines. Meanwhile, Mark grew more intense in our sessions. He spoke more about justice and retribution than healing. Sometimes he'd drop hints. Sometimes the ones who suffer most aren't the ones at fault, but the ones who let things happen and watch me carefully for a reaction. The packages at my office increased. Sometimes they arrived with no return address, sometimes with cryptic notes. You don't get to move on. You don't get to forget. One afternoon, as Lila left, I saw her lingering outside, texting. Moments later, Mark showed up, acting surprised to see her. But the awkward tension between them told me it was no coincidence. I realized, with a sickening certainty, that I was being targeted and not by accident. The pressure was unbearable. I started double-locking my doors, avoiding late sessions, jumping at every sound. My nightmares were haunted by images of Ron, the accident, and the faces of the family he destroyed. One day, as I was gathering my notes after a session, I found a Hello Kitty sticker on my office chair. It was childish and chilling. That was the last straw. I decided to confront Mark directly. During his next session, I told him I knew about the packages, the notes, and the connection with Lila. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared at me with cold, hollow eyes. Then he smiled, a bitter twist to his lips. You don't get to escape this, Sylvia. You let him ruin my life, so now you know what it's like to lose everything. Maybe next time, you'll lock your prescriptions away." His words left me trembling. For the first time, I realized the depth of his anger and how much danger I was in. But there was something else in his expression too. Regret? Or was it guilt about something even darker? After that confrontation, I couldn't get Mark's words or Lila's obsessive behavior out of my head. I started reviewing my session notes, piecing together stray comments and moments that hadn't made sense at the time. Late one evening, while closing up my office, I saw Lila in the corridor. She didn't see me, but a moment later, Mark appeared. They spoke in hushed voices, and the way Lila looked at him, it was raw, desperate, almost worshipful. Suddenly, it all snapped into focus. Lila hadn't just been obsessing over a random married man. She'd been stalking Mark. She was the one sending the packages, the one orchestrating the mind games, and Mark, in his grief and rage, had encouraged her. He wanted me to suffer as he had suffered, to pay for Ron's sins. The realization left me nauseous. How long had this been going on? How deep did their plan go? I knew I had to do something, but fear and doubt gnawed at me. What if they hurt me? What if the truth destroyed what was left of my reputation? But I couldn't hide anymore. I had to act, even if it meant breaking every rule I'd ever followed as a therapist. The next week, I scheduled Lila and Mark's sessions back-to-back, determined to gather concrete evidence. I recorded their sessions, something I'd never done before, but my fear outweighed my ethics. During Lila's session, she rambled about guilt, accidents, and making people really pay for hurting others. "Sometimes you have to push," she whispered, eyes distant. "Sometimes you have to do what nobody else will." After she left, I confronted Mark in our session, laying out what I knew: the stalking, the gifts, the coordinated mind games. He didn't deny any of it. "She loved me. I just wanted you to feel even a fraction of my pain." That night, unable to sleep, I replayed every word. The puzzle pieces fit too well. The accident, the aftermath, the haunting, none of it was random. And then, in a horrifying flash of clarity, I realized the truth. Lila wasn't just obsessed, she'd been there that night. She'd been the one who pushed the mother and child in front of Ron's car. The next morning, my hands were shaking as I pulled up the security footage from my office building. I had to see for myself. Sure enough, on the day of the accident, Lila's face appeared on the screen, lurking outside just minutes before the crash. I spent the day consumed by anxiety and dread. My training told me to protect patient confidentiality at all costs, but my conscience screamed that keeping silent would mean more pain, maybe even more deaths. That afternoon, Lila arrived for her session, all nervous energy and darting eyes. I tried to stay calm, asking gentle questions, but she grew agitated. Finally, she blurted, "It's not my fault. He wanted her gone. I just made it happen faster." Everything inside me froze. I realized I was listening to a confession that changed everything. After she left, I sat alone in my office, weighing my options: protecting my patient or doing what was right, silence or truth. I knew in that moment what I had to do, even if it meant destroying the last pieces of my old life. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote a full account of what I'd learned: dates, recordings, Lila's confession, everything. With trembling hands, I brought my evidence to the police the next morning. The detective listened in stunned silence as I explained how Lila had manipulated Mark, how I had ignored my doubts, and how patient confidentiality could no longer protect someone who had taken lives. The aftermath was brutal. News spread fast. Psychologist breaks confidentiality to solve hit and run. My colleagues were divided. Some called me a hero, others a traitor. I lost my practice, faced endless interviews, and became the target of angry messages online. But for the first time since the accident, I felt strangely free. The police opened a new investigation. Lila was arrested and charged. Mark eventually wrote me a letter, not of forgiveness, but of weary understanding. "Pain eats everything," he said, "but maybe now it can stop." I'd lost almost everything, but I'd found my voice. In the end, I closed the door on my private practice for good. The place that once felt safe was now a museum of memories, some good, some unbearably painful. With my reputation in shreds but my conscience clear, I decided to accept an offer to teach psychology at the local university. Standing in front of a new generation of students, I shared not only textbooks but the lessons of real life. The price of truth, the weight of silence, and the courage it takes to do what's right, even when it means losing everything else. Some nights, I still dream about Ron, about the accident, about the faces of the family that will never come home. But I'm learning to live with the scars, not as a victim, but as someone who chose honesty over fear. If there's one thing I want others to know, it's this. Even in chaos, don't lose yourself. Speak your truth. Set yourself free. Thank you for listening, Reddit.